The smell of machine oil and metal shavings had long ago become more familiar to me than the comforts of home. At 70, I still went to my auto shop on Church Street in Rocky Mount every morning, even though I could have handed things over to someone younger long ago. But my hands would reach for the tools and my brain would automatically diagnose problems by the sound of the engine. 30 years ago, I'd started this business with my last savings, and Kingsley Auto was now one of the most reliable services in town. There wasn't much work this morning, only 3 cars in line for repairs. Not bad for a Tuesday. First in line was an old Toyota with a bad alternator. The owner, a young mother with 2 kids in the back seat, was fretting over every extra dollar in the estimate. I understood her anxiety. I had once counted every penny myself. Under the hood of the old Chevy, I could see a familiar sight: worn brake pads and a leaking radiator. The owner of the car, an elderly farmer in a faded shirt, shuffled nervously by. "How much is this going to cost, Michael?" "$400, Charlie. The pads have to be replaced, and the radiator's fine for now." Charlie nodded with relief. He knew that I wouldn't cheat, and I wouldn't charge too much. Over the years, thousands of cars and hundreds of grateful customers had passed through my service. The work was not only profitable, but also satisfying. It was worth a lot to see the engine start properly after your intervention. My assistant Tom was working with a Ford in a neighboring box. The guy had been working for me for 3 years, diligent and honest. Sometimes I thought it would be a good idea to hand over the service department to him, but I didn't dare. Too much was connected to this place. My entire adult life, successes and failures, joys and sorrows. When I first opened the shop, Doris worked here, doing all the paperwork and communicating with customers. She could find an approach to anyone, both to a demanding lady with an expensive Mercedes and to a student with a crumbling Honda. Clients adored her, and I marveled at how easily she turned a potential conflict into a friendly conversation. The phone rang as I was finishing my inspection of the engine. My son's name popped up on the display. "Hey, Dad." Rob's voice sounded habitually carefree. "How are things going in the garage?" "Fine, what about you?" "Listen, Jason's birthday is the day after tomorrow. 10 years, can you believe it? Heather wants to throw him a party at this new restaurant on Main Street called Golden Palace. It's got a great banquet room, live music, entertainers." I wiped my hands with a rag, sensing where this conversation was headed. Golden Palace, one of the most expensive restaurants in the city, a place where the local elite celebrates important events. "How much is that going to cost?" "Well, it's about 30 people. 2,000 maybe. Maybe a little more. Heather says a kid should remember his birthday for the rest of his life." "Of course Heather says that." My sister-in-law always knew how to make the most of other people's money. In 7 years of marriage, she never once worked, explaining that she needed to keep busy with the house and kids. The house was a 3-story cottage in an upscale neighborhood, and the kids went to a private school called St. Anne's, where tuition cost half of my annual income. "Rob, do you realize that $2,000 is a lot of money?" "Dad, come on, that's nothing to you. You make so much money on your cars. I make that much." If he knew how much of my pennies goes to his family every month. The mortgage on their house is $200. The loan on Heather's Audi, $550. Private school for the kids, $800 a month. Groceries, clothes, entertainment, summer camp for the grandkids, health insurance. All of that had been hanging over me for a year now. Plus the constant little things: Heather's new phone, repairing their air conditioner, paying for a babysitter for the night they go to the theater. "Can't you pay for your son's birthday party yourself?" There was a pause in the phone. Rob didn't find it right away. "Dad, I told you, we're in a period of transition. The new project is just starting up and the money hasn't come in yet. But things will get better soon and I'll pay you back." A new project. There's been 10 of them in the last 5 years. An online sporting goods store, a health food delivery service, an investment course. Each time Rob would get excited about the idea, invest my money, and a few months later he'd find an explanation for why it didn't work out. The market wasn't ready, competitors were dumping, partners had failed. The last time it was something to do with cryptocurrency. I never fully understood it, but $15,000 disappeared in 2 months. "Rob, listen, maybe we should have a party at home. Invite Jason's friends over, order pizza, cake, Kids don't care where they party, it's all about the mood. Dad, come on, Heather's already invited everyone. Her friends with their families, her coworkers. We can't just say no now. What will people think? What people will think? Heather's main concern was impressing people. It was important to her to show that her family was living large, that they could afford the best. The fact that it was all paid for out of the pocket of a simple mechanic was not necessary for the guests to know. Okay, I said, feeling the familiar fatigue. I'll transfer the money to your card. Thanks, Dad, you're the best. The kids are gonna love it. The kids. 10-year-old Jason and 8-year-old Emma really loved Grandpa. When I visited them, they would run toward me screaming with joy, talking about school, showing me their drawings. I would do anything for them, and Rob knew it. After the conversation, I stood in the garage for a long time, looking at the disassembled engine. My wife Doris, heaven rest her soul, always said I was too soft on my son. Michael, you're spoiling him. He should be earning his own living, not hanging around your neck. But after she died 5 years ago, Rob was the only close family I had left, if you didn't count the grandchildren. And I didn't want to lose him, although sometimes it felt like I already had. Rob only called when he needed money. He rarely came to family dinners, and that was at the insistence of the kids. Heather thought I was a loser, unworthy of their company. I could see it in her eyes when I came to visit them in my work clothes, smelling of machine oil. I remember walking in on them unannounced 3 years ago. Heather was hosting her girlfriends over coffee in the living room. She introduced me as Rob's dad, without mentioning that I was their children's grandfather. All evening I felt out of place listening to talk about expensive resorts and private clubs. What does your father-in-law do? One of the guests asked. He works with cars, Heather answered with a strained smile. He works with cars, as if I wasn't the owner of a successful business, but a simple locksmith. I didn't say anything, not wanting to ruin the evening, but the residue lingered. Tom finished working on the Ford and came over to me. Michael, is everything okay? You look pensive. Just some family stuff. Tom nodded understandingly. He was single and often said he was in no hurry to start a family. I look at the others and all I see is trouble, he joked. Maybe he was right. Charlie picked up his Chevy toward evening, shaking my hand gratefully. A woman came to pick up the Toyota. It turned out that the alternator had been repaired without replacement, and the bill was half the estimate. The joy on her face was genuine. I closed the garage and drove home to my small apartment above the service station. After Doris died, I'd sold our house. Too many memories, too empty. The apartment was compact but cozy. Kitchen, bedroom, living room, with large windows overlooking the main street. In the kitchen, I heated up yesterday's soup and turned on the TV. The news was on. Another political squabble, rising gasoline prices, tomorrow's weather forecast. The usual life of an ordinary American city in which everyone had his own worries. But my thoughts kept coming back to my family. I loved my grandchildren and wanted the best for them. But more and more, I wondered if I was doing the right thing, helping Rob out all the time. Maybe Doris was right, and it was time for him to take responsibility for his own decisions. On the other hand, if I stopped helping, the kids would suffer. It's not Jason and Emma's fault their parents are living beyond their means. They're used to a certain standard of living. They have friends in private school, plans for the future. Late that night, I transferred money through the bank's mobile app. $2,000 disappeared from the account with a tap of the screen. A transaction notification came to my phone, and I felt the familiar bitterness. How much longer could this go on? Opening my notebook, I tried to calculate how much I'd spent on Rob's family over the past year. It came out to about $30,000, almost half of my net income. My son still thought I was a cheapskate who was greedy with money. A car with loud music drove by outside the window. A dog barked somewhere. The usual sounds of the evening city to which honest people fell asleep after a hard day's work. And I lay there thinking that tomorrow Rob would spend my money on another showcase event where I would be tolerated out of politeness. In the morning, I woke up thinking about Jason's upcoming birthday. Today was the day to buy presents and pick up the grandkids from school. Heather had asked for it the day before, citing an important meeting with her friends to plan a charity event. Charity, of course, just another way to show those around her how wonderful and socially responsible she was. There wasn't much to do at the auto shop, So I asked Tom to keep an eye on things and headed to the Rocky Mount Mall. I didn't like the place. Too noisy, too crowded, too expensive. But there was no choice. This was the place where they sold those toys and gadgets that modern kids dream of. In the electronics store, the consultant, a guy of about 25 in a fashionable shirt, immediately identified me as a potential buyer of expensive equipment. "What can I do for you?" "I need a gift for my grandson. It's his 10th birthday." "Ah, that's a good age. How about a video game console? Or a tablet? We're having a special on the latest model." I looked at the price tags and mentally shook my head. A game console cost $500, a tablet, and even more. In my childhood, for that kind of money, you could buy a bicycle that would last for years. "Is there something simpler?" The consultant grimaced, as if I suggested he sell me a typewriter. "Well, there are older models, but children nowadays understand technology. They'll know it's not the newest. They'll know right away. A 10-year-old will be disappointed with a $300 gift because it's not $500. I remembered my childhood in the 50s, when a new baseball seemed like the greatest treasure, and a bicycle bought for a birthday was cherished like the apple of your eye. In the end, I bought Jason a mid-price video game console and a few games, $450. For Emma, I picked out a professional-grade art set and the doll she'd asked me for last time, $200 more. My pocket was lighter by a tidy sum, but I knew I would see genuine joy in my grandchildren's eyes, and it was worth the money spent. St. Anne's Private School was located in a beautiful brick building in the center of town, surrounded by a neat lawn and flower beds. The fence was low but solid, the gates were wrought iron, with the name of the school in gold letters. Everything here spoke of the prestige and costliness of education. I parked at the main entrance and made my way to the reception area. The receptionist, an elegant middle-aged woman, looked at me through her glasses. "Are you here for someone?" "My grandchildren, Jason and Emma Kingsley." "Oh, yes, Mrs. Kingsley warned me." "ID, please." I showed my driver's license. The receptionist carefully checked the data and nodded. "They're about to finish their last class. You can wait in the hall." The hall of the school was impressive. Marble columns, old portraits in gilded frames, a showcase with cups and awards. On the walls hung photos of graduates, many of whom became famous people in the city and beyond. Children of doctors, lawyers, businessmen, the local elite, studied here. The bell heralded the end of classes, and a few minutes later, the voices and footsteps of children rang through the hallways. Jason and Emma appeared almost simultaneously, he from math class, she from French class. When they saw me, they both rushed toward me. "Grandpa!" Emma hung around my neck. "We didn't know you were coming." "Mom said one of our parents was picking us up, but she didn't say who," Jason added, wrapping his arms around my waist. The sincere joy of my grandchildren always touched me to the core. In their embrace, all the hurt and disappointment associated with their parents disappeared. "How are things going at school?" I asked as we walked to the car. "Fine," Jason said. "We had a math test today. I think I did okay." "Shinonama, I had a presentation in French," Emma said proudly. "I talked about the Louvre. Madame Dupont gave me an A French at 10. When I was growing up, I didn't learn a foreign language until high school, and not all of them did. But times have changed, and children now receive an education from an early age that I never dreamed of." "Grandpa, is it true that tomorrow is my birthday party at the Golden Palace?" Jason asked, settling into the back seat. "It's true. Mom and Dad have organized everything." "It's very expensive, isn't it?" Emma intervened. "Amanda said their family dinners there cost as much as a car." Amanda is the daughter of a local banker and a classmate of Emma's. Apparently, even the kids at that school had an idea of the prices at high-end establishments. "Well, not like a car," I smiled. "But yeah, it's not cheap." "Can Dad afford it?" Jason asked with childlike directness. The question caught me off guard. The kids had obviously heard something at home, some scraps of conversation between their parents. "Of course they could," I lied. "Dad's smart. He's got a lot of ideas." "Yeah, Mom always says that Dad is a successful entrepreneur." Emma nodded. "What's an entrepreneur?" It's a person who creates his own business," I explained. "He figures out how to make money." "Are you an entrepreneur?" Jason asked. "In a way, yes. I have a car service." "But it's not the same," Emma said seriously. Mom explained. You're just a mechanic and Dad's a real businessman. Just a mechanic. The 8-year-old's words hurt my heart, even though I knew she was just repeating what she'd heard at home. For Heather, there was a gulf of social status between just a mechanic and a real businessman. What's the difference? I asked, trying to keep my tone even. Well, businessmen wear suits and work in offices, Emma explained. Mechanics get their hands dirty and make less money. How do you know that? So how my mom told me. She says it's important to get a good education so you don't have to work with your hands. Not to work with your hands. So 30 years of honest labor, hundreds of satisfied customers, the reputation of a reliable master. All this is worthless in the eyes of my daughter-in-law. The main thing is to wear a suit and sit in the office, even if you live on other people's money. I like to work with my hands, Jason said. Yekoman, remember Grandpa, when you showed me the engine in the car? That was great. Jason, Emma was outraged. Mom says it's not for us. We'll go to university and get good professions. Is Grandpa bad? The boy asked. No, Grandpa is good. He's just different. Different. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, trying not to show how hurt I was by this innocent, childish reasoning. They loved me. I could feel it in every word, every gesture. But even now, at 10 and 8 years old, they had internalized a value system in which Grandpa occupied a place somewhere at the bottom of the social ladder. We stopped at a Pizza Hut cafe for a bite to eat before heading home. The kids were animatedly talking about schoolwork, friends, and weekend plans. Jason was into soccer and dreamed of making the school team. Emma was practicing ballet and was going to participate in the spring concert. Grandpa, will you come to my concert? She asked, dipping a slice of pizza into the sauce. I'll definitely come if my parents don't mind. Why should they mind? Jason wondered. I mean, it's not that big of a deal. They have their own plans, their own social circle. Mom always says you're busy at work, Emma said. That you have a lot of clients and can't get away. Busy at work. A convenient excuse for not inviting just a mechanic to social events. Although I've always been willing to close service early for the grandkids. Are there gonna be a lot of people? A lot of people at the birthday party tomorrow? Jason asked. Yes, my mom invited all my classmates, Emma said, and some of her friends with their kids. That makes 30 people. Shiri? All my friends are jealous, Jason said proudly. They have their birthdays at home, and I'm having mine at a real restaurant. A real restaurant. At my expense, I wanted to add, but I held back. Kids shouldn't know about adults' financial problems. After the cafe, we stopped at a toy store. I wanted to buy something else for tomorrow's party. Jason spent a long time choosing between a constructor and a board game, and Emma fell in love with a beautiful music box with a ballerina. Grandpa, it's so beautiful, she marveled. Can I buy it? Of course you can. The cashier punched all the purchases, another $150 to today's spending. But the grandchildren's joy was worth any money. On the way to Rob's house, Emma suddenly asked, Grandpa, why don't you have a new wife? The question took me by surprise. Why do I need a new wife? Well, so you don't get bored. Mom says that lonely people are sad. I'm not sad. I have a job, I have friends, and most importantly, I have you. Mom says you need to find a good woman, Jason interjected. Someone to take care of you. Someone who will take care of me. I guess in Heather's mind, I was a decrepit old man in need of care. Although in my 70s, I felt quite alert and independent. I haven't met the right woman yet, I replied diplomatically. What kind of woman should she be? Emma asked curiously. Kind, smart, funny. Someone who will love not only me, but also my grandchildren. And beautiful? Beauty is a secondary matter. The main thing is what's in a person's soul. We drove up to Rob's house, an impressive 2-story cottage in the prestigious hillside neighborhood. The lot was large with a neat lawn and flower beds maintained by a hired service. A 2-garage carport, automatic gates, CCTV, all the trappings of a successful life, paid for with my money. Heather met us at the door, looking impeccable even in her homemade clothes. Her blonde hair was styled, her makeup neat, her manicure fresh. She was always looking after herself. Well, did you get your grandfather back in one piece? She turned to the children without even saying hello to me. Mom, Grandpa bought us presents, Emma announced happily. And we ate at Pizza Hut, Jason added. Heather wrinkled her nose slightly. Jason, you have a big day tomorrow. You need to watch your diet. Watch your diet. One slice of pizza wouldn't hurt a healthy child, but Heather always found a reason to be unhappy. Thanks for picking up the kids, she told me dryly. Rob hadn't gotten back from his meeting yet. The meeting. I wondered which one. Rob's meetings usually ended with him asking for money for another promising project. Tell him I'll be at the restaurant tomorrow at 2 o'clock, I said. Okay, goodbye. The door closed, and I was alone on the porch of the house I'd helped pay for 5 years. Inside, I could hear the voices of children telling their mother about their time with me. Tomorrow would be a holiday, expensive and pompous, and the day after tomorrow, life would return to the same old routine. Phone calls asking for money, infrequent meetings with my grandchildren, the polite patience of my daughter-in-law. Saturday morning, I woke up with a heavy premonition. My grandson's birthday was supposed to be a celebration, but something inside told me that everything would not go as planned. At breakfast, I sat for a long time with a cup of coffee, looking out the window at the empty morning street and thinking about the evening ahead. The Golden Palace restaurant was located in the heart of the city, in a beautiful 19th century historic building. Formerly the residence of a local industrialist, it was now one of Rocky Mount's most prestigious establishments. I arrived half an hour before the appointed time, even though I knew I'd be the first one there. Heather was always late, considering it a sign of importance. The banquet hall was magnificent, with crystal chandeliers, velvet drapes, and gilded moldings on the ceiling. The tables were covered with snow-white tablecloths with silverware. In the center of each stood bouquets of expensive flowers. Live music. A pianist in a tuxedo played something classical, creating the atmosphere of an elite event. The animator, a young guy in a bright suit, was rehearsing his program in a corner of the hall. Next to him stood props for magic tricks and inflatable balloons. On a separate table was a huge cake in the shape of a soccer ball, the birthday boy's passion. Are you Mr. Kingsley? A waiter in a snow-white shirt addressed me. Yes, I'm the birthday boy's grandfather. Welcome. Mrs. Kingsley told me you were coming. You're welcome to sit anywhere. The guests will be arriving soon. I chose a seat at a table in the far corner where I could see the whole room. From there, I could watch what was going on without drawing attention to myself. Experience told me that at such events, I was assigned the role of a silent statistician, to be present but not to interfere. The first to arrive were the kids, Jason's classmates, and their parents. They were all dressed up as if they were going to a social event. Boys in suits and ties, girls in festive dresses. The parents looked no less solemn. Ladies in designer clothes, men in expensive suits. Jason appeared in the hall in his new blue suit, beaming with happiness. When he saw me, he came running over. Grandpa, you're here. Where's your present? I'll bring it back tomorrow, I winked. Today is your day, so enjoy it. Emma was twirling around in a pink dress with ruffles, obviously proud of her outfit. Rob looked pleased with himself in his new suit, which, judging by the cut, cost at least $1,000. But the star of the evening was, of course, Heather. My sister-in-law was literally glowing with pleasure as she accepted the congratulations of the guests. She wore a black cocktail dress that emphasized her slender figure. Expensive jewelry sparkled in the light of chandeliers. Her hair was arranged in an elaborate style. Her makeup was flawless. She looked like the hostess of a social salon, hosting a select society. Maria, how are things at the clinic? She addressed the wife of the local doctor. Oh, thank you for asking. We're opening a new plastic surgery department. Didn't Rob tell you? Of course he did. He's got such a wide range of business contacts, always up to date on all the new business. A wide range of business connections. Rob smiled sweetly as he accepted the undeserved compliments. In reality, his business connections were limited to casual acquaintances in bars and attempts to involve his buddies in dubious schemes. Gradually, the room filled with guests. Families of Jason's classmates, Heather's friends with their husbands, a few neighbors from the upscale neighborhood. All of these people belonged to the local elite, doctors, lawyers, successful businessmen. Conversations were about real estate, private schools, summer homes, and European resorts. I sat in my corner, feeling like a stranger at this celebration. I was wearing the best suit I had, but it was clearly losing out to the designer outfits of the other guests. A few people politely greeted me. recognizing that I was the birthday boy's grandfather, but the conversation went no further than formal phrases. "And who is he?" I heard one of the ladies whisper, pointing in my direction. "Rob's father," Heather answered her in a whisper but loud enough for me to hear. "Works at a car service, works in an auto body shop, not owns a car service, but works." A small but telling difference in wording. The animator began his performance, and the children gathered around him. Jason laughed and clapped his hands, enjoying the attention and admiration of his friends. Emma was helping her brother with the contests, both looking happy. At the next table were the parents of Jason's classmates, a doctor and his wife, and a local lawyer and his wife. They were talking animatedly about their summer vacation plans. "We're thinking of sending Alexander to a camp in Colorado," the doctor's wife said. "There is a great program to study nature. And we are leaning toward a language camp in France," said the wife of the lawyer. "A child needs to know several languages in today's world. Language camp in France. I wonder how much it costs. Probably at least 5,000 per shift." Jason and Emma also went to such camps every summer, and of course it was paid for by Grandpa the mechanic. Dinner was served upscale, several course rotations, gourmet appetizers, expensive wines for the adults and juices for the kids. I tried the seafood salad and meat with some intricate sauce. It was delicious, but the portions seemed ridiculously small for the price. "Rob, tell me about your new project," one of Heather's friends, an elegant blonde woman of about 35, asked. "Heather said you had a very interesting idea." "Oh yes," my son perked up, setting aside his wineglass. "It's a revolutionary online marketing concept for small businesses. We're creating a platform that will allow small companies to compete with large corporations on the internet. A revolutionary concept. I've heard those words 100 times. Each of Rob's new projects has been revolutionary, breakthrough, and promising. So far, none of them have yielded anything but losses." "Sounds exciting," said one of the guests, a middle-aged man in an expensive suit. "Are there any investors already?" "Of course," Rob said confidently. "I have great connections in the business community. Financing will be no problem. Great connections in the business community." If by that he meant a mechanic father who would pay any amount of money for his son, then yes, he did have great connections. "How much investment would be required?" asked the doctor's wife. 50,000 is enough to start," Rob replied casually. "Then of course you'll need to expand. 50,000 to start." I almost choked on my wine. Where was he going to get that kind of money? From his mechanic dad, of course. Who else would he rob? Heather glowed with pride as she listened to her husband talk about his grand plans. The guests nodded with understanding. $50,000 was not such a large sum for this circle. "Rob's always had a good eye for the future," Heather said proudly. "He has a talent for business. A talent for business. A talent for spending other people's money. That's what he really had." After dinner, the congratulations began. Children gave Jason toys and books. Adults gave him more expensive gifts. Some gave him a professional-grade bicycle, others a latest model tablet. Jason accepted the gifts with delight, his eyes shining with happiness. The guests took turns making speeches, wishing the boy health, success in studies and sports, and a happy future. Everyone spoke beautifully and correctly, but somehow shambolic, as if they were reading a written text. "And now a word to Grandpa," Heather suddenly announced, and all eyes turned to me. I hadn't expected this, and I was confused. My throat was dry and my hands were damp. "Thank you, but I didn't have a speech prepared." "Come on, improvise," someone from the guests said cheerfully. "It's better to speak from the heart." I got up from my seat and walked over to the birthday boy's table. Jason looked at me with love and anticipation. "Jason," I began, looking at my grandson, "I wish you to grow up to be an honest and hardworking man. Remember that the most important thing in life is not money, but your family and friends who love you." "Very touching," Heather said with a faint irony in her voice. "The philosophy of a simple man. A simple man's philosophy." Even in my speech, she managed to find a reason to demean me. It was time for cake. The huge confection was brought out to the applause of the guests. Jason blew out 10 candles, making a wish, and the cutting of the cake began. Slices were handed out to everyone on beautiful china plates. Heather took one of the slices and headed in my direction. I thought it was nice of her to personally bring me a treat. Michael, this is for you, she said with a sweet smile. I held out my hand, expecting a plate, but Heather suddenly threw a piece of cake in my face. Here's your piece, you beggar, she said loudly to the whole room. Time seemed to stop. Cream and biscuits slowly dripped from my face onto my suit. Some of the guests gasped in shock. The children froze with their mouths open. And Rob laughed. Heather, did you see his face? Shumam, my son laughed, slapping his knees. It was like a comedy. I should have videotaped it. The room split in half. Some watched in horror, others grinned uncertainly, not knowing how to react. The pianist stopped playing. The animator stopped in mid-focus. I slowly wiped my face with a napkin, feeling the rage rising inside. 70 years of life, 30 years of honest labor, years of supporting an ungrateful family, and this was the result. Public humiliation from her own relatives. Heather, that wasn't necessary, one of the guests, a doctor, said quietly. Come on, it was just a joke, my sister-in-law said. He won't take offense. He has a sense of humor. He won't take offense. A simple mechanic must tolerate any abuse and keep silent. He belongs in the corner among the servants. A merry family, whispered one of the guests to his neighbor. Strange relationship, he replied. Jason and Emma looked on in bewilderment. They obviously didn't understand why the adults were acting this way, but they could feel the tension. I stood up and walked over to the microphone that was next to the piano. The musician looked at me questioningly, but stepped aside. Ladies and gentlemen, I began, turning on the microphone. My voice sounded clear and loud. Let me tell you a little story. Dad, what are you doing? Rob asked worriedly, stopping laughing. I ignored him and continued. See this beautiful restaurant? This lavish banquet for 30 people? Do you know who's paying for all this? There was a tense silence in the room. Even the children stopped making noise. Yeah, a penniless mechanic from a car repair shop on Church Street. The room fell completely silent. My words hung in the air like thunder. The guests looked at me, then at each other, trying to comprehend what they had heard. The waiters froze with trays in their hands. Even the children stopped making noise, sensing the adults' tension. Heather stood next to the cake, and the expression on her face slowly changed from confusion to understanding, from comprehension to horror. The blush escaped her cheeks, leaving a sickly pallor. Beautiful lips opened, but no sound came out. Would you like to know who pays the mortgage on the 3-story house in Hillside? I continued, savoring the dead silence. Yeah. Who's covering the loan on this lady's Audi? Me too. Private school for the kids, $800 a month? And that's me. The doctor's wife rounded her eyes and looked back at her husband. The lawyer frowned, obviously trying to realize what he'd gotten himself into. The rest of the guests sat like statues, afraid to miss a word of my speech. Rob tried to approach the microphone, but I held up my hand, stopping him. I've been supporting this family for 5 years, I continued, feeling lighter with each word. Every month, $3,000 goes out of my account for their expenses, and my successful entrepreneur son hasn't earned a dime with his own hands. Michael, stop this right now. Finally found Heather's voice, but he was shaking with fear. No, dear sister-in-law, I won't stop. I've been silent for too long. I've spent $38,000 on you in the last year. And do you know what I got in return? I pointed to my face, still sticky from the cream. A piece of cake in my face and the title of pauper. There were judgmental whispers in the room. Several women shook their heads, looking at Heather with disapproval. The men frowned, clearly not understanding the logic of what was happening. Dad, you've got it all wrong. Rob tried to intervene, but his voice was uncertain. I explained to you about the temporary difficulties. Temporary difficulties? I laughed and it sounded bitter. 5 years of temporary difficulties? 10 failed projects or temporary difficulties? One of the guests, a middle-aged banker whom I recognized from the pictures in the local newspaper, leaned over to his neighbor and whispered something in his ear. He nodded understandingly. Apparently, such family financial schemes were not new in their circles. Michael, please. Heather tried to approach me, but I stepped back. We can discuss this at home, quietly. Why bring family matters into the public eye? Why? I looked at her carefully. Why was it necessary to humiliate me in front of these people? Why was it necessary to throw a cake in the face of the man who was supporting you? Jason and Emma sat at the kids' table, eyes wide. They obviously didn't understand the intricacies of what was going on, but they could sense that Grandpa was very upset, and their parents were in a bad situation. Grandpa, Jason called softly, you're not going to be friends with Mom and Dad anymore? My grandson's question hit me harder than any adult reproach. I stood there for a moment, not knowing what to say to him. Grandpa will always love you and Emma, I said into the microphone, looking at my grandchildren. No matter what happens between adults. This is all some kind of mistake. Rob tried to salvage the situation, turning to the guests. Oh, Dad's tired. He's stressed out at work. Stress at work? I grinned. Yes, there's stress. Stress from having to work not only for himself, but for a 35-year-old adult man with a family. The lawyer's wife clearly couldn't take the stress and began to pack her purse, clearly intending to leave. Several other women followed her example. The men sat tensely awaiting developments. Shireen, do you want to know how much it cost me to support this family? I continued, feeling the excitement of what was happening. The house in Hillside is $1,200 a month. Heather's Audi, $550. School, $800. Plus groceries, clothes, entertainment, vacations. Enough, Heather shouted, her voice hysterical. Stop embarrassing us in front of people. Embarrass. I looked at her in surprise. Who made you live beyond your means? Who made you lie to people about your financial situation? The doctor's wife, an elegant woman in her 40s, stood up and approached Heather. Honey, maybe we should really continue this conversation at home, she suggested gently. The children can see and hear everything. Yes, you're right, Heather agreed, grasping at straws. Michael, let's get this play over with. Play? I shook my head. No, Heather. A play is when you play the successful businesswoman and your husband plays the successful entrepreneur. And what's happening right now is called the truth. Rob tried to take the microphone away from me, but I held it tight. Dad, you can't do this anymore. You can see how embarrassing this is for the kids. Kids are embarrassed? I looked at Jason and Emma. Wasn't I embarrassed when your wife called me a mechanic in front of your kids? When she told them that Grandpa was a loser, unworthy of their company? There were indignant sighs in the hall. Several guests shook their heads, clearly disapproving of Heather's behavior. The banker was writing something down on his phone. Apparently, the story seemed worthy of retelling in business circles. I never said you were a loser. Heather tried to defend herself, but her voice sounded unconvincing. You didn't? What about simple mechanic? Works on cars. I grinned. And these people didn't even know I owned a car service, not a hired locksmith. The doctor sitting at the next table raised his eyebrows in surprise. So you're the owner of Kingsley Auto on Church Street? He asked. Great service. I take my car there. Reliable and honest? Thank you, I nodded. 30 years building this business. But it still wasn't prestigious enough for some people. Heather stood with her head down, clearly realizing the situation was out of control. Rob fidgeted nervously with his tie, shifting from foot to foot. You know what the most frustrating thing is? I continued, addressing the whole room. It's not the money. Money is just paper. It's that my own son is willing to laugh at his father's humiliation in order to please his wife. Rob blushed and lowered his eyes. Several of the men in the audience looked at each other. Apparently the subject of relationships with wives and parents was not alien to them. And now for the best part, I said, realizing I was nearing the climax. Tonight, dear guests, you have witnessed a historic moment. The hall once again froze in anticipation. Tomorrow morning, I'm going to the bank and revoking all powers of attorney, changing all passwords, closing all automatic transfers. Starting Monday, my son's family is living solely on their own resources. Heather staggered back, gripping the back of her chair. Her face was dead pale. Dad, you can't do this, Rob whispered. We've got commitments, loans. Commitments? I looked at him in surprise. Who made them? Did I sign the papers to buy the house and the car? But you promised to help. I could hear panic in my son's voice. I promised to help, not support. There's a difference, don't you think? Helping is when a man works hard and tries, but sometimes he doesn't have enough. Maintenance is a grown man and his family living solely on his parents' money. One of the guests, an older man in an expensive suit, nodded approvingly. That's right, he said. Oyurrekulin, children should be taught independence, not pampered until they are old. Shut up, Heather snapped at him. This is none of your business. Heather, Heather snapped at her, realizing that his wife was only making the situation worse. I won't shut up, she continued, losing all composure. I'm fed up. This old man spoils everything with his moralizing. We are young, beautiful. We should have a good life. At whose expense? I asked quietly. At anyone's expense, she shouted. You're alone anyway. You don't need money. What will you do with it in the grave? The hall gasped at this frankness. Several women stood up and headed for the exit, clearly not wanting to be present at a family scandal of this magnitude. Heather, shut up, Rob whispered pleadingly. But it was too late. The mask of the well-mannered socialite had finally fallen off, revealing the true face of my sister-in-law. Why don't you say something? She continued. Let everyone know. That greedy old man is blackmailing us. We live in fear that he could leave us without money at any moment. And rightly so, said one of the remaining guests, the banker's wife. Grown-ups should earn their own living. Shut up, Heather shrieked. Your husband is a banker. It's easy for you to talk. The banker stood up, took his wife's hand, and headed for the exit. Inyana, I'm sorry for the inconvenience, he said to me. Good luck with your family problems. The other guests followed him. After a few minutes, the only people left were the closest family friends and the parents of Jason's classmates, who didn't know how to act in this situation. There, I said, turning off the microphone. Now everyone knew the truth about the Kingsley family's success. Jason cried not from understanding what was happening, but from general tension and fear. Emma hugged her little brother, sobbing too. See what you've done? Rob accused me. You've ruined the kids' party. I ruined it? I wondered. Who threw the cake in Grandpa's face in front of the kids? The animator, who had been standing in the corner with the balloons the whole time, hesitantly approached Heather. Madam, should we continue with the program or... Get the hell out of here, she shouted. The party is over. The remaining guests hurriedly began to pack up. The parents of Jason's classmates were picking up their children, awkwardly saying goodbye and avoiding eye contact. I walked over to my grandchildren and took a seat next to them. Jason, Emma, Grandpa loves you very much, I said quietly. He always will, no matter what happens. Why did you fight with Daddy and Mommy? Emma asked through her tears. Sometimes adults can't find common ground, I explained. But that doesn't mean I don't love you or Daddy anymore. Will we see you again? Jason asked. Of course you will, I promised, though I wasn't sure if my parents would let me see my grandchildren after today. Heather stood at the window, sobbing into her handkerchief. Rob paced the hall, nervously talking on his phone, apparently trying to explain to one of his friends what was going on. The hall emptied. We were the only ones left, a broken family amidst the remnants of a lavish banquet. The cake was still on the table, but now it seemed like a grim monument to shattered illusions. What's going to happen now? Rob asked, approaching me. You'll start living your own life now, I answered calmly. A life of your own. But how? We don't have money. We don't have jobs. You'll find a job. Sell the house, buy something simpler. Move your kids to a regular school. Millions of people live like that and don't complain. You don't understand, Rob started to say, but I interrupted him. I understand perfectly. I understand that it's time for me to live my life and you to live yours. I kissed my grandchildren goodbye and headed out. Heather caught up with me at the door. Michael. She tried to take my hand, but I pulled away. Michael, I was wrong. I'm sorry, please. I looked at her carefully. Her makeup was smeared with tears. Her hair was messed up. But there was no remorse in her eyes, just fear of an uncertain future. Heather, I said quietly, you're not apologizing because of the cake. You're apologizing because you realized there was no money tomorrow. She turned away, unable to find anything to say. I went outside and took a deep breath of the cool evening air. For the first time in years, I felt truly free. I greeted Sunday morning with a feeling I hadn't experienced in years, a feeling of complete liberation. I woke up early, as usual, but instead of the usual heaviness in my chest, I felt a strange lightness. Last night seemed to lift the weight of years of lies and pretense from my shoulders. At breakfast, I made a list of things to do for the day. The first item was to go to the bank. The second was to revoke my powers of attorney from the notary. And the third was to change my passwords for all online services. The plan was clear and simple, like a blueprint for an engine that I was going to take apart and reassemble. The First National Bank on Main Street was only open until lunchtime on Sundays, but that was enough time for me. The manager, David Coleman, had known me for 20 years and had handled all of my auto shop's large transactions, equipment loans, deposits, and savings. "Michael," he greeted me cheerfully. "How are you? We don't see you much on Sundays." "Hey, David, I need to make some changes to my accounts. It's urgent." "Sure, come on in the office. Do you want coffee?" We were seated in his spacious office overlooking the city's main street. Coleman was an old-school professional, never questioning clients' personal motivations, but always willing to help with financial matters. "David, I need to revoke all the powers of attorney on my accounts," I began without preamble. He raised his eyebrows but nodded. "Good. Is this about the power of attorney for your son?" "That's the one. Rob should no longer have access to my money." "Understood. And we're canceling the automatic transfers?" "All of them. And I want to change my online banking passwords." Coleman began entering data into the computer, occasionally checking the details. The procedure was simpler than I expected. A few signatures, a couple of confirmation printouts, new access codes. "Michael, if it's no secret, was there a problem?" he asked cautiously as we were finishing the paperwork. "No secret. Decided a 35-year-old man should make his own living." Coleman grinned. "Wise decision. Seen a lot of families destroyed by the financial dependence of adult children. Doesn't make anyone happy." "Exactly," I agreed. As I walked out of the bank, I felt myself getting freer with every step. No one else could control the money I had earned through hard work. No more unexpected debits. No more calls asking me to borrow until payday. Next stop was Elizabeth Green's notary's office on Oak Street. The old lady had been in practice for 40 years and remembered my father. She was where I'd gotten power of attorney for Rob 3 years ago, when I'd been in the hospital after a heart attack. "Mr. Kingsley," she said when she recognized me, "what brings you out on a Sunday?" "I need to revoke the power of attorney that was executed in 2022. "For your son?" "Okay, let's find the documents." She went through the file cabinet and pulled out a folder with my papers. "Here we go. Robert Kingsley, full power of attorney for bank accounts and real estate." "Revocable?" "Absolutely. May I ask why?" "Just for the record, I don't see the need for such a power of attorney anymore," I replied diplomatically. Green nodded and began to draw up the revocation papers. It took half an hour to fill out the forms, sign and stamp them. "Totordi." "Done," she said, handing me copies. "As of tomorrow, the power of attorney is invalid." I returned home for dinner, feeling satisfied with the work I had done. All that remained was to change passwords for online services and payment systems. I sat down at my computer and methodically began updating the data. Banking applications, payment systems, and store accounts where Rob had saved my cards. My phone rang as I was changing my Amazon password. My son's name popped up on the screen. "Hi, Dad." Rob's voice sounded unusually polite. "How are you doing? How'd you sleep?" "I was fine. What about you?" "Listen, about last night. Heather and I talked all night. We realized we were wrong. Heather wants to apologize." "Oh, I see. Dad, say something. We're family. We can't fight over something stupid like this." "Rob, I'm not fighting. I've just made a decision." "What decision?" "The one I told you about yesterday. From tomorrow, you're on your own." There was a pause in the phone. You could hear Rob breathing, trying to find the right words. "Dad, you can't be serious, can you? It's just emotions after yesterday. Things always seem different in the morning." "I'm serious. I went to the bank and the notary this morning. Powers of attorney have been revoked. Automatic transfers have been canceled." "What?" There was panic in my son's voice. "You can't do that." "I can, and I did." "But we have loans, obligations, the kids. The kids have nothing to do with this, and the loans and the obligations are your problem. You're adults. You can work it out yourselves." "Dad, please." Rob's voice had a pleading tone to it. "Give us time. A month, at least 2 weeks. I'll get a job. Things will get better. Rob, you've been looking for a job for 5 years. If you wanted one, you would have found one long ago. But this is different. I realized I was wrong. I'm going to look hard. I'm going to look hard. We'll see. So you won't even give me a chance? My voice was getting more and more desperate. You've had plenty of chances. It's time to get smart. Rob fell silent, apparently considering a new strategy. What about the kids? He tried a different approach. Jason and Emma are used to a certain standard of living. Do you want them to suffer because of our adult problems? Children don't suffer from a humble life. They suffer from the lies and hypocrisy of adults. Dad, what are you talking about? What lies? Rob, you really don't get it, do you? You've been lying to people about your financial situation for 5 years. Your wife lies about who supports your family. The kids are growing up in an atmosphere of constant deception. We didn't lie. We just, kept the details private. Call it what you want. The result is the same. You're living in a fantasy world. There was another pause. Then Rob spoke in a different tone, a harsher one. Okay, what if I don't get a job? What if we get evicted from the house? You'll find one or rent something cheaper. Millions of people live like that. You're willing to sacrifice your grandchildren's well-being for your principles? I'm willing to teach my grandchildren the right principles, unlike their parents. The conversation was clearly reaching an impasse. Rob realized that pleading and threats weren't working. You know what, Dad? He finally said. You're going to regret this decision. We'll find a way out without you. I hope you do. I sincerely hope so. And don't expect us to thank you. You're being selfish. Maybe I am. But a selfish man who's worked hard for 30 years and earned the right to control his money. Your money? There's a bit of anger in my voice. Oh, who helped you in the service department? Who brought you customers? You? I was surprised. When did you bring clients to my car service? I just, you know, recommended you to people I know. Rob, you've brought me exactly one customer in 5 years. A buddy of yours who didn't pay for the repairs. Okay, that's not the point. The point is that families are supposed to support each other. Support, not parasitize. Parasitize? My voice got really angry. How dare you say that? It's easy. A man who doesn't work for 5 years, but drives an expensive car and lives in a prestigious house. That's a parasite. You know what? Go to hell with your moralizing. I'm sick of listening to your moralizing. Finally, some honest word, I said calmly. We'll do without you and your money, and you'll never see your children again. Rob, don't be silly. Don't be silly. If you don't want to help your family, you don't belong in the family. All right, let's see how long you can survive without my help. You'll see, he shouted and hung up. I put the phone down and went back to the computer. I had a few more passwords to change. My son's threats didn't scare me. I knew that in a week or two he would call again, but with a different tone. An hour later, the phone rang again. Heather. Michael, she began in a sweet voice. Can we talk like adults? We can. I realize I behaved terribly last night. It was stressful, emotional. I'm truly sorry for what happened. Okay. Michael, Rob, and I are ready to change our lives, but we need time to adjust. We can't just start tomorrow. Yes, we can, and we should. But think about the kids. Jason's going into 5th grade. He's got friends at private school. Emma's taking ballet. You can't destroy their world because of adult issues. Their world is built on lies, Heather. It's better to destroy it now than to let the kids live in an illusion. What illusions? This is a normal middle-class life, paid for with other people's money. But your family, a family should help each other. Help each other, not support each other completely. What's the difference, don't you understand? I do, but Michael, give us 6 months. Rob will get a job. We'll start paying off our debts, but gradually, not so abruptly. Heather, I don't want to be a part of this play anymore. You're adults. You can work out your own problems. What if we can't? What if we get evicted? You'll find something cheaper. The world won't fall apart. You're a cruel, selfish man, she snapped. Bashtin will be thrown out on the street. and you'll sleep in your apartment. You're not going to be thrown out on the street. There's plenty of rentals in the city for reasonable money. Reasonable money? We don't have any money. Then it's time for Rob to get a job. He's looking, but good jobs aren't easy to find. Then let him look for any job he wants. He'll start small like normal people. Do you want him to be a loader? A janitor? What's wrong with that? Honest labor is better than living off the books. Heather's been quiet. Apparently, the idea that her husband could do manual labor was unacceptable to her. Michael, she said again, tears welling up in her voice, I'm begging you. Think about Jason and Emma. It's not their fault. That's why I made this decision. Children should grow up in an honest family, not in a house built on lies. Shekshorn. But it's going to be hard on them. They won't understand why their lives have suddenly changed. Yes, they will. Kids are smarter than you think. They adapt faster than adults. And school? Emma's ballet? Jason's soccer team? There are free clubs and public schools. Nothing bad's going to happen to the kids. You're destroying our family, she screamed. I'm not. I'm stopping sponsoring lies. It's the same thing. No, Heather. If your family is only held together by my money, then there was no family at all. She hung up without saying goodbye. I finished my coffee and finished changing passwords. The job was done. The financial umbilical cord connecting me to my son's family had been cut. In the evening, I sat in the kitchen, reading the newspaper and reflecting on the day. For the first time in many years, Sunday belonged to me alone. No one had called with requests. No one was counting on my help. No one was planning to spend my money. It got dark outside. The streetlights came on. A warm glow appeared in the windows of the houses. Somewhere out there in the big house in Hillside, my family was discussing the new reality. Tomorrow they would have to wake up in a world where there was no grandpa ATM, where adults had to earn their own living. I felt no regret or joy, only the peace of mind of a man who had finally done what he should have done years ago. The week passed in remarkable calm. For the first time in years, I worked at a car service without thinking about how much money would go to support someone else's family. Every dollar I earned belonged to me. Every spending decision was mine alone. The feeling of freedom was intoxicating. Tom noticed the change in my mood on Tuesday. Michael, you look different, he said as we repaired the transmission of the old Ford. It's like a weight has been lifted off your shoulders. I did, I said without going into details. There was a lot of work. Spring traditionally brings a flood of customers after winter breakdowns. I went into business with my head, enjoying the usual rhythm. Diagnostics, repair, communication with customers. Simple, straightforward tasks where the outcome depended only on your skill and honesty. Rob didn't call. Heather was silent too. I had no illusions. I knew it was the calm before the storm. Sooner or later, reality would force them to reach out to me, but with a different tone. On Wednesday night, the house phone rang. An unfamiliar number. Sornum. Hello? Michael? A woman's voice, excited and frightened. This is Susan Park, the neighbor of your... Rob and Heather. Susan, I remembered. Pediatrician, lived across the street. A nice woman we'd said hello to a few times at children's parties. Hello, Susan. What's wrong? I don't know if I should call you, but there's been yelling all night. They're fighting so loud you can hear it from across the street. Kids crying. My heart is tingling with anxiety. I see. Thanks for letting me know. Michael, I don't want to interfere in family matters, but if you need help with the kids, I'm a doctor, okay? I understand. Anything serious happens, you just call me. After hanging up the phone, I sat in the chair for a long time, thinking about what was going on. Of course, scandals were inevitable. When a family accustomed to spending $3,000 or $4,000 a month is suddenly left without income, tension builds quickly. On Thursday morning, Charlie, the farmer with the Chevy, came into the auto shop. Michael, he said, taking off his cap, wanted to thank you for the repairs. The car runs like clockwork. You're welcome, Charlie. Always happy to help. Listen, do you know if your son is looking for a job? I looked up from the engine I was examining. Why? My neighbor, Joe Miller, he's got a car wash on Ridgewood Avenue. He says he needs people. It's no big deal washing cars, vacuuming. But the pay's fair, $15 an hour. $15 an hour. That's about 2,500 a month if you work full-time. Not much for a family used to spending 3 times as much, but it's a start. I'll tell him, I promised. Just make him hurry up. Joe says people get jobs fast. That evening I dialed Rob's number, but got an answering machine. I left a message about the job at the car wash, though I doubted my son would take it seriously. Friday afternoon, Heather arrived at the car wash. I saw her through the window. She was sitting in her Audi and was clearly working up the courage to get in. The car was filthy, which was unthinkable for Heather. She usually washed it twice a week. Finally, she got out and headed for the entrance. She was wearing a simple denim jacket instead of her usual designer outfits, her hair gathered into a careless ponytail. She looked tired and confused. "Michael," she said, stopping in the doorway, "can I talk to you?" "Come in." Tom had just left for lunch, so we're alone. Heather walked hesitantly into the office part of the service and sat down in the customer chair. "How's it going?" I asked, wiping my hands with a rag. "Bad," she answered honestly. "Very bad." I waited in silence for her to continue. "Michael, I came to apologize. A real apology, not like last time." "I'm listening." "I was awful. What I did in that restaurant was disgusting. I have no excuses." "I'm glad you understand." "I do. And I also realize that I took you for granted. Like an ATM machine, yeah." "You were right." She paused, obviously searching for words. "Heather, have you come to ask for money?" "No," she answered quickly. "I mean, not exactly." "What do you mean, not exactly?" "I came to tell you what's going on and to ask for, not for money. I came here to ask for a chance to make things right." "Tell me." Heather took a deep breath. "Monday morning, we got a notice from the bank, an overdue mortgage payment. Rob said it was a mistake, that you'd just forgotten to transfer the money." "I didn't." "Yeah, I realized that. He went to the bank on Tuesday, tried to withdraw money from your accounts. They told him the access was blocked." "How'd he take it?" "Badly, really bad. Came home and threw a tantrum, yelling that you betrayed him, that he didn't expect this from his father." "Did he start looking for work?" "That's a whole other story," Heather grimaced. "Oh, he says he can't work in low-level jobs, that he has a reputation in the business community." "What kind of reputation?" "Well, as a successful entrepreneur." "Heather, your husband has no reputation in the business community, except for a reputation for screwing up projects." She lowered her eyes. "Yeah, I realized that too. This week." "Realized what exactly?" "That we were living in some kind of fantasy world. Rob was telling me about his business successes, his promising projects. And I believed it. I thought he was actually making money." "Where do you think the money for your lifestyle came from?" I thought it was from his projects, plus some help from you. But I didn't realize our whole life was your money." Heather pulled a handkerchief out of her purse and blotted her eyes. Her makeup was almost gone, and she looked younger and more defenseless without it. "Now, on Wednesday, a man from the car dealership came to see us, said that if there was no payment by the end of the month, the car would be repossessed." "Makes sense." Rob tried to explain to him that it was just a temporary problem, that we'd work it out. But he said he'd heard that 100 times before. "So now what?" "Rob says he'll find a way. He'll go to his friends, get a loan." "What do his friends say?" "No one's answering the phone yet," Heather admitted quietly. It was predictable. Rob had friends as long as he spent money in bars and restaurants. When the money ran out, the friends quickly disappeared. "Heather, what do you think you're going to do?" "Me?" She was surprised by the question. "I don't know. I've never worked." "Never?" "Well, I did some waitressing in college, but that was 15 years ago." "So you know how to do it. What's the problem?" "Michael, how can I waitress? All my friends would find out." "So what?" "So what? It's humiliating." "Honest work is not demeaning, Heather. But I have an education. I come from a good family." "What does that get you?" "Well, it must give you something." I shook my head. Even now, when the family was on the verge of bankruptcy, Heather clung to her social prejudices. "Heather, did you come here to ask for something specific?" "Michael, give us a month. 1 month to get a job and get back on our feet. Just pay the mortgage and the car loan. That's all I'm asking for. That's only $2,000 a month. Yeah, but this is the last time. I promise. Heather, do you realize a month isn't enough time? Rob can't find a job in a month. At least not one that he's happy with. He will. He promised. He's promised that many times. But this is different. Now he realizes there is no alternative. There's always an alternative. You can sell the house, move to a smaller apartment, sell the car, buy something cheaper. But the kids, school. Heather, there are great public schools in this town. You don't understand. If we move the kids from private school, everyone will know we're in trouble. Everyone already knows after Sunday's scandal. Heather blushed. Apparently, news of the incident at the restaurant had already spread around town. Michael, please, one last time. Give us a chance to save face. Save face? Heather, you lost face the moment you decided to live off other people's money and lie about it. But we're a family, she started crying. How can you abandon your grandchildren? I'm not abandoning my grandchildren. I stopped sponsoring their parents' lies. It's the same thing. No, it's not the same thing. Jason and Emma won't be hurt by this. They'll just live normal lives, not in a fantasy world of wealth. Heather stood up and started pacing around the office, nervously rubbing the strap of her purse. You don't understand what it's like to lose everything at once. The house, the car, the status. I understand perfectly. I was 25 when I lost my job at the factory, left with no money and a sick wife in my arms. So what did you do? Worked, anywhere I had to. Washing dishes in cafes, unloading trucks, till I saved up money to open a car service. But that was a different time. Heather, time doesn't matter. People have always been able to make a living if they wanted to work. She stopped and looked at me with desperation. Michael, if you don't help us, we're going to lose everything. The house, the car. The kids will have to go to another school. Rob's going to get depressed. And if I do, what's going to change? Rob will never learn to work. You'll still be living on borrowed time. It could go on for years. It won't. I promise. Heather, you can't promise for another person, especially for a person who doesn't want to change. She sat back down and covered her face with her hands. What do we do? Work. Start living within our means. Sell what you can't pay for. Will the children understand? Children will understand quicker than you think. They're not as materialistic as adults, but their friends, school. Heather, real friends don't abandon you for money, and if they do, then they weren't friends. She raised her head and looked at me with red eyes. You're really not giving us a dime. I won't. Not even for the grandchildren, especially for the grandkids. Heather stood up and headed for the exit. She turned around at the door. Do you know what Rob says about you? I don't know, and I don't want to know. He says you've become an angry, greedy old man, that your mother's death broke you. Maybe he's right, but it's my life, and I have a right to be a mean old man. And the kids, they ask why Grandpa doesn't come. It hurt my heart, but I held back. Tell the kids that Grandpa loves them, and tell them they can always come to me. Rob won't allow it. Then I'm not the problem. Heather walked out without saying goodbye. I watched out the window as she got into the car. She sat behind the wheel with her head resting on her hands for a long time. Then she started the engine and drove off. Tom came back from lunch and noticed my condition. Everything okay, Michael? Yeah, just some family stuff. Oh, I see. Would you like me to close one today? No, thanks. Work is the best cure for sad thoughts. We worked through the evening, barely speaking. It wasn't until the end of the day that I realized I'd made the right decision. Heather didn't come to apologize. She came to bargain. She wasn't sorry for my feelings, but for the comfort she'd lost. And until they realized the difference between those things, there was no way to help them. Saturday morning, I was working on Mrs. Johnson's Honda in the garage when I heard children's voices outside. I looked out the window and saw a familiar sight, Jason and Emma running out of Heather's Audi and running toward the entrance of the auto shop. Grandpa, Emma shouted, flying into the garage. We're here to see you. Jason was a little more subdued, but the joy in his eyes was genuine. I wiped my hands and hugged my grandchildren, feeling my heart fill with warmth. No matter what their parents were like, children were still the dearest thing I had. Hi, my good ones. How's school going? Fine, Jason answered. What are you fixing? Mrs. Johnson's Honda. Would you like to see it? The boy nodded enthusiastically. I showed him the fault in the brake system, explained how the hydraulics worked. Jason listened attentively, asking intelligent questions. Emma, meanwhile, was doodling something in her notebook, sitting on an old chair in the corner of the garage. Heather showed up a few minutes later. She looked even worse than last time. Circles under her eyes, pallor, nervous lip twitching. She was wearing the same denim jacket as last time, only now it seemed even more out of place for a woman used to designer clothes. Michael, she said cautiously, can we talk? Sure. Kids, why don't you go play in the yard, okay? Can I stay? Jason asked. I'm curious about cars. Sadie, Jason, go with your sister, Heather said firmly. The adults will talk. The kids reluctantly left the garage. I watched them settle on a bench near the entrance, far enough away to not hear the conversation, but close enough to see us. Did you bring the kids for added effect? I asked. Heather flinched. No, I mean, they wanted to see you. They kept asking why you weren't coming. And what do you tell them? I tell them Grandpa has a lot of work to do. Lying, in other words. Michael, don't start that again. That's not why I'm here. I waited, continuing to work on the brake pads. The physical work helped keep me calm in tense conversations. The children are suffering, she said finally. They don't understand what's going on. Jason asks why we don't eat at restaurants anymore. Emma cries because she can't invite her friends to her birthday party. What do you explain to them? Rob says we're having temporary money problems, that things will pick up soon. So it's another lie. What else do you tell a 10-year-old kid? That daddy's a loser and grandpa's greedy? I straightened up and looked at her carefully. Heather, it's okay to tell the truth, that adults have to earn their own living, that a family moves to a more modest standard of living, but there's nothing wrong with that. No big deal. She raised her voice, but then she realized and looked back at the children. It's no big deal if the kids get expelled from private school. Have they already been expelled? Not yet, but if we don't pay next semester's fees, when is the due date? By the 15th of next month. That gives us time to find a job. Michael, you can't make $8,000 in 3 weeks. $8,000? I was surprised. In a semester? A year. You have to pay the full amount all at once. $8,000 a year for 2 kids. That's half my annual profit. And that's just the school, not counting everything else. Then it's all the more reason to move the kids to a regular school. You don't understand. Heather grabbed my arm. If we move them now in the middle of the school year, everyone will realize we're in financial trouble. Heather, everyone already realized that after the scandal at the restaurant. Not everyone, not the teachers at the school, not the parents of the classmates. So what? So what? We'll be talked about. Children will be pitied. It's humiliating. I shook my head. Even now, as the family teetered on the brink of bankruptcy, Heather's greatest fear was gossip. You know what's really humiliating? I asked. Living in debt and pretending to be rich. We weren't pretending. We were just, living a normal life. At someone else's expense. At the family's expense. You're the kid's grandfather. That's right. A grandfather, not a bank. Heather stepped back to the window and looked out at the children playing. Jason was explaining something to his sister, waving his arms. Emma listened with a serious look. Michael, she said without turning around, what if we could find a compromise? What kind of compromise? You only help with the children, school, clubs, clothes. Rob and I take care of the house and the car. So you're suggesting that I support the grandkids instead of you? Yeah, you love them, don't you? Of course I love them. But it's the parents' job to support the kids, not the grandparents. But if the parents can't, then the parents have to find a way, or change their lifestyle. Heather turned to me, a desperate gleam in her eyes. Michael, do you want Jason and Emma to go to public school? For them to lose all their friends? Heather, real friends don't lose their friends over changing schools. But it's going to be hard on them. They're used to a certain level. Kids adjust quickly, faster than adults. What about Emma's dancing? Jason's soccer? It's not just fun, it's their future. There are free clubs in town, but not at this level. Heather, it's not the price, it's the quality of the coaches and the desire of the kids. She approached me again, and there was a pleading tone in her voice. Michael, I realize that Rob and I have disappointed you. We've been horrible, ungrateful, but it's not the kids' fault. No, they're not. Then help them. Not us, them. Heather, helping kids isn't about paying for their expensive schools and activities. Helping kids is about giving them the right values and honest parents. Honest parents? She flared up. Are you saying we're dishonest? What else would you call people who live in debt and lie about it? We didn't lie. Heather, you spent 5 years telling everyone that Rob was a successful businessman. That was a lie. Shionori Furna. But we believed he was. You believed your own lies. That's even worse. Heather fell silent, clearly realizing it was useless to argue. Then suddenly she came to the door. Jason, Emma, come here. The children ran into the garage, looking curiously at the adults. What, Mom? Emma asked. Tell Grandpa how much you miss him. I felt anger rising in me. Heather had decided to use the children as a tool of pressure. We miss you a lot, Grandpa, Jason said honestly. Why don't you come visit us? And when are we going to the zoo? Emma added. You promised. Grandpa's busy, kids, Heather quickly intervened. He doesn't have time for us. Heather, don't lie to the kids, I said sharply. Why should we tell the truth? That Grandpa left us because he was fed up with us? Mommy, Emma cried out in fright. Grandpa left us, Jason asked quietly. I sat down next to my grandchildren and held their hands. Grandpa will never leave you, I said, looking into their eyes. Grandpa loves you very much. Then why aren't you coming? Emma asked. Because Grandpa has a complicated relationship with your parents right now. Because of what? I looked at Heather. She stood there with her fists clenched, clearly afraid that I would tell the kids the truth. Because of the money, I said simply. Adults sometimes can't agree on money. Can we fix that? Jason asked. You can, when your parents learn to earn their own money. Doesn't Dad earn a living? Emma wondered. Heather paled as she realized where she was going with this conversation. Dad's looking for a job, I said diplomatically. And while he's looking, Grandpa has decided not to help with the money. But we're your grandchildren, Jason exclaimed. Don't grandfathers help their grandchildren? They do, but in different ways. Some grandfathers give money, others teach them how to live a good life. What kind of grandfather are you? Emma asked. I'm the one who teaches me how to live well. Wouldn't you give me money? Jason asked. You need something very important, I will. But parents have to take care of the family themselves. Heather couldn't take it anymore. Jason, Emma, go to the car. We're going home now. Mom, we still want to be with Grandpa. Go to the car, she repeated sharply. The children obediently walked out of the garage. Emma turned around on the doorstep and waved at me. I waved back, feeling my heart clench. See? Heather said when we were alone. You're upsetting the kids. You're the one upsetting them by using them as a blackmail tool. I'm not blackmailing. I'm showing you that your decision is hurting innocent people. Heather, the only thing hurting my decision is your pride. If you'd stop clinging to ostentatious luxury, the children would have nothing to lose. Nothing would be lost. What about school? Friends? A familiar way of life? They'd lose their illusions and gain honest parents. You're a cruel man, she said quietly. Perhaps, but I'm honest. And what good is your honesty if it hurts the children? Children don't suffer from honesty, Heather. They suffer from lies. She was on her way out, but she turned around at the door. You know what Emma asked me to do last night? What was that? For me to apologize to you? She said if Mom apologized, Grandpa would forgive and everything would go back to the way it was. Smart girl. Yes, she is. Smarter than her mother. She doesn't realize that sometimes an apology isn't enough. Apologizing isn't enough, I agreed. It takes action. Sorrow, what kind of action? Rob has to get a job. You too. You have to start living within your means. And if we can't, you can. If you want to, and if we don't want to, then it's your choice and your consequences. Heather stood for a moment, then walked out. I watched out the window as she got into the car. The kids waved at me from the windows and I waved back. Then the car turned the corner and disappeared. I went back to work on the Honda, but my thoughts were jumbled. Talking to my grandchildren upset me more than I expected. Seeing their sad eyes, hearing their questions about why Grandpa had abandoned them, it was hard. But I knew I was doing the right thing. Children will adapt to their new life faster than adults. And most importantly, they will get a chance to grow up in an honest family, where there is no need to lie about their situation and live at the expense of others. At lunchtime, the phone rang. Tom. Michael, are you okay? You look upset. Family matters, I answered briefly. I see. Do you want to talk? Sometimes it helps to talk things out. Thanks, Tom. But some problems need to be solved alone. I'm here for you. I know, it's worth it. I sat at home that night and thought about my conversation with Heather. Her attempt to use the kids was predictable, but no less painful. She didn't understand the main point, that the real help for children is not in paying for expensive schools, but in giving them honest and independent parents. Tomorrow would be a new day, and Rob's family would once again face the reality of life without Grandpa's money. Sooner or later, they will have to make a choice. Learn to live honestly or continue to cling to illusions until they collapse. I had hoped that common sense would win out, but so far there was no sign of it. The month passed quickly and unnoticed. March was replaced by April. The car service added more work. Spring repairs, replacement of winter tires for summer ones, preparation of cars for the summer season. I went headlong into business, trying not to think about my son's family. News came through third parties. Susan Park called twice, telling me about the loud scandals in the house across the street, that the kids were now being driven to school by their father in an old rental car. Charlie mentioned that he'd seen Rob at Joe Miller's car wash, but he'd only worked there for 3 days and left after a conflict with his boss. In early April, I learned that the Hillside house was for sale. The ad had appeared in the local paper. 3-story cottage, 4 bedrooms, 2 garage carport, urgent sale. The price was undervalued, suggesting the sellers were desperate. Bank notices for late payments were probably falling like snow. The car dealership had picked up Heather's Audi back in mid-March. I watched the tow truck haul the car away, and neighbors looked out their windows curiously. Tom had noticed my brooding in those days. Michael, maybe we should help them, he suggested cautiously. It's family. There are many ways to help, I replied. Sometimes the best help is to let a person fall down and get back up. And the kids will get over it. They have their whole lives ahead of them to learn the difference between ostentatious prosperity and real values. In late April, I received a phone call that I had expected but hoped to avoid. It was the receptionist from the law firm of Green & Associates. Mr. Kingsley, this is Linda from Attorney Green's office. Your son asked you to contact him about the divorce and child custody. Divorce. So financial difficulties have finally ruined Rob and Heather's already shaky relationship. It was predictable. When the money disappears, so does the illusion of a happy family. Tell my son that I'm willing to meet, but only about the children, I said. The meeting took place the next day in a neutral setting, the Friendship Cafe on the outskirts of town. Rob showed up at exactly the right time, and I hardly recognized him. The gloss of a successful businessman was gone. Cheap shirt, crumpled jeans, unshaven face. There were dark circles under his eyes and his hands were fidgeting with napkins. Hi, Dad, he said, sitting down across from him. Hello, Rob. How's it going? Shit, he said shortly. It sucks. The waitress brought us coffee. Rob was silent for a long time, obviously searching for words. Finally, he decided to speak. Heather and I are getting a divorce. I'm sorry. No, you're not, he grinned bitterly. It's what you wanted. Rob, I never wanted your family destroyed. Yeah? What did you want then? I wanted you to be a grown man, able to support your wife and children. Well, now I don't have to support my wife. Happy? I looked at my son carefully. In his eyes, I could see pain, fatigue, and deep resentment. What happened, Rob? What happened? He laughed, not amused. Life happened, Dad. A real life without your money. Tell me. Rob took a sip of coffee, wincing at the bitterness. The house was the first thing we lost. 3 months behind on the mortgage, and the bank started foreclosure proceedings. Heather was hysterical every day, accusing me of every mortal sin. Did you look for a job? I did, he flared up. You think it's easy to get a job when you have no experience in the workforce? With a resume full of failed startups? Joe had only worked at the car wash for 3 days. Did you know that? Rob was surprised. Yeah, I did. Do you know what it's like to wash cars for $15 an hour when you're used to thinking of yourself as an entrepreneur? There's nothing degrading about honest labor. That's easy to say when you've been an owner all your life. And I stood there like the last loser with a rag, and former buddies drove by and looked like a clown. Why'd you leave? Joe started yelling at me in front of everyone, saying you're working slowly, distracting the customers by talking. I couldn't take it anymore, so I told him to go away. Rob was silent, staring out the window at the passing cars. His face reflected all the bitterness of the last month. What about the kid? I asked. That's what finally brought our family down, he said grimly. Heather couldn't stand the fact that the children would have to be transferred to a regular school. She made a scene, yelled at me for ruining her children's lives. Her kids. Yeah, that's what she said. Eventually it turned out she'd always thought I was a temporary solution. She didn't marry for love, but because she thought I could provide her with a comfortable life. And now what? Now she's filed for divorce. She wants alimony. She wants to take the kids and move to her mom's in Atlanta. What about you? What about me? I don't have money for lawyers. I don't have a steady job. What are my chances in court? Rob pulled a crumpled pack of cigarettes from his pocket. His hands trembled as he lit it. You started smoking? I wondered. A month ago. My nerves couldn't take it. We were quiet for a while. The cafe was almost empty, just us and an elderly couple in the corner. Quiet music was playing, and spring rain was drizzling outside the window. Rob, what do you want from me? Help. This is the last time I'm asking for help. Money? Not just money. Heather's agreed to leave the kids with me if I can prove I can support them. I need a steady job and a decent place to live. E? Take me to a car dealership. As a partner, or at least an assistant. I'll learn. I'll work honestly. Just give me a chance. The offer took me by surprise. I stared at my son for a long time, trying to figure out how serious he was. Rob, are you ready to work with your hands? Get dirty with machine oil? To get $30,000 a year instead of $300,000 in expenses? I am. I don't have a choice. What if an easy money opportunity comes along? Another revolutionary idea. It won't. I realized I don't have a talent for business. Maybe I have a talent for something else. I stirred the sugar in my coffee, thinking about the offer. On the one hand, my son did seem broken and ready to change. On the other hand, how many times had I heard similar promises before? What about a place to live? I asked. I'm renting a studio apartment on Old Street. It's a bit cramped for 3 people, but it's tolerable. What's the rent? Sold my watches and suits, plus the odd part-time job helping people move, unloading stuff in stores. So you know how to work when you need to? I can. Turns out I can. Rob put out his cigarette and looked me in the eye. Dad, I know I've been a real bastard. Laughing when Heather humiliated you. Took it for granted that you'd support me until I was old. I was an idiot. You were. And I understand if you don't forgive me. But think of the kids. Heather will take them to Atlanta, and you'll never see them again. That was a strong argument. Losing your grandchildren forever is a painful prospect. What do the kids say? They want to stay with me. Emma's been very clear about not wanting to move. Jason's against it too. Why not? Heather lied to them about you leaving them. And I told them the truth, that Grandpa didn't. He just didn't want to support lazy parents anymore. How'd they take it? They were fine. Jason even said he understood you, that if he was going to make money, he wouldn't give it to someone who didn't want to work. Smart kid. He realized at 10 what his father didn't realize until he was 35. Rob, what about Heather? Is she really ready to leave the kids? She is. Turns out motherhood is hard work for her. She's excited about starting a new life without the commitment. I see. Dad, I'm not apologizing for everything. I know trust has to be earned. Just give me a chance to try. I was silent for a long time, weighing the pros and cons. Taking my son into the business was risky. He could disappoint again. Conflicts could arise. But the alternative was to lose my grandchildren forever. Okay, I said at last. Let's give it a try. Seriously? Seriously, but with conditions. What are they? 1. You work as a regular employee, no favors. 2. No talk of money until you prove you can work honestly. 3. If you fail once, you don't get another chance. I agree, I'll do anything. And one more condition. The kids. What about them? If I help you keep them, you won't interfere with our communication. You won't use them as bargaining chips in family arguments. I promise. Rob held out his hand for me to shake. I shook it, feeling a strange mixture of hope and caution. A week later, Rob went to work at the car service. The first few days were hard. He didn't know how to handle the tools, was slow-witted, and constantly asked for advice. But he didn't complain. He didn't whine. He worked from bell to bell. Tom took the new employee with understanding. The guy is trying, he told me at the end of the first week. You can see he's been through a lot. What do you think? I think he could make a good mechanic. He's got the hands, he's got the head. Just as long as he doesn't run away when things get better. The divorce trial went smoothly. Heather really did not fight for the children. She was enough alimony in the amount of $300 a month and the right to see them once every 6 months. The house was sold for 70% of the market value, debts on loans closed. The rest of the money shared in the divorce? In May, Jason and Emma moved in with his father in a one-bedroom apartment Rob had rented on the outskirts of town. The children were transferred to the neighborhood school where the children of workers and employees studied. There was no tragedy. They quickly made new friends and even did better in their studies. Grandpa, Emma said to me during one of our Sunday trips to the park, do you know that Daddy has become more cheerful? Did he? Yes, laughs. He used to be always sad and angry. Now he tells us about his work, shows us what he's fixed, and he doesn't yell at us when we make noise. Jason was nodding along. And he's stopped lying, the boy added. He used to always say he had important things to do, but he was just surfing the internet. Now if he says he's busy with work, he really is. The kids have adapted to their new life much easier than I expected. A modest apartment, simple food, inexpensive clothes. All this did not upset them. The most important thing to them was that Daddy was finally a real daddy, not a perpetually disgruntled loser. We never crossed paths with Heather again. She went to her mother's house in Atlanta and, according to rumors, got a job as a manager at a cosmetics company. She rarely called the kids, mostly on holidays. At the end of the summer, I realized that the experiment with my son was succeeding. Rob really changed. He became responsible, stopped complaining about life, learned to appreciate what he had. His salary was modest, but the family lived honestly, without debts and illusions. One evening, he stayed after work to talk to me. Dad, I want to say thank you. For what? For not letting me rot. If you'd kept supporting me, I'd still be an infantile idiot. Rob, every man makes his own path. Yeah, but sometimes you need a nudge to see the right path. You gave me that nudge. A painful nudge. But it worked. You know what I'm thinking about now? What? I want to be the kind of grandfather to my future grandchildren that you were to Jason and Emma. Not an ATM, but an example. I looked at my son, and for the first time in years, I saw in his eyes not the perpetual dissatisfaction with life, but the calm of a man who had found his place in the world. The past could not be changed. Years of lies, resentment, and disappointment remained in the memory. But the future depended on what lesson we learned from past mistakes. And the lesson was simple. True love must sometimes be tough to become wise.